Israel's Security Cabinet has agreed the six-week ceasefire deal in Gaza. The full cabinet is now meeting to vote on the deal's terms. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says final details have been ironed out after previously claiming that Hamas had backtracked on parts of the agreement. Far-right National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir has threatened to resign if the ceasefire is approved. Mr. Netanyahu says some hostages still being held by Hamas could be freed as early as Sunday. Let's go straight to Jerusalem, where we join our correspondent, Konstantin Eggert. Welcome, Konstantin. What else can you tell us about what's just happened there?
Well, as you said, Phil, it's now the meeting of the full cabinet, and the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said that it will sort of convene 1 hour before Sabbath begins, the Jewish day off. So the sundown today is at 5 p.m. So in about maybe 45 minutes, they are supposed to end the meeting.
Right. Full cabinet. What is the likelihood of it being this deal being approved? I mentioned earlier that there have been threats of resignations.
Yes, the far-right security minister, Itamar Ben-Gvir, said yesterday that he's going to leave the cabinet if the deal is approved. But it is supposed that at least that's what our sources tell us, that the vote will be for the hostage deal. And one thing that could go, well, slightly haywire, if you wish, is that maybe some other ministers, there are ministers that allegedly oppose this deal, they may resign. But again, I would like to stress may, not well. So far, only one minister, Itamar Ben-Gvir, said that he's going to go.
Okay, and you mentioned Shabbat there. So this is the sundown today. Is that effectively a deadline on the cabinet deliberations?
Yes, at least that's what the Prime Minister's office said, that they convene 1 hour before the sundown and they are supposed to sort of pack it into, that was the inference, if you wish, in 1 hour. But maybe it will go on for longer, we don't know. It is going on now, the meeting.
Okay, and so we expect Sunday there to be a ceasefire.
Yes, I mean, if previous history is anything to go by, so maybe around about midday, noon, there's going to be a cessation of hostilities, and maybe closer to early evening, first hostages may be released, but this is all just a projection. I mean, you can never predict that, but this is how it usually happened before. So that's what is expected, and it is expected that everything will be done according to plan. So if it is approved, all the time sort of schedules will be kept.
Tell us more about Israeli public attitudes towards this deal.
Well, look, if the polls are anything to go by, for example, I looked at the polls conducted by the Israeli Institute of Democracy, Israel Democracy Institute. 58% of Israelis approve the deal as it is. Another 12% approve the deal, but say we should have like an opt-out to continue pursuing Hamas. So if you combine these two, 58 plus 12, it's 70% are for the deal, so it's more than 2/3. And it's not a surprise for me because you see rallies in support of hostages. And hostages are looking at you literally from every second wall, from the posters, which basically are all over Israel. So I think that the support for the deal among the public opinion is fairly strong.
Okay. Meanwhile, the Israeli military is still striking targets in Gaza with a deal, hopefully just hours, perhaps days away. Why are they still doing this?
Well, because it's the military, Phil. For them, as long as it's not peace, it is war. And they have their operational planning and they have target lists, and they're going to continue to do it as long as they can. So until the cessation of hostilities is announced, or rather is enters into force. I'm sorry. So that is how it was before, and this is probably how it's going to be now. It is a different logic from the logic of politicians. They do their job. That's how they see it.
Thanks for that, Konstantin Eggert in Jerusalem. Okay, let's take a closer look at how the ceasefire and hostage deal is expected to work. Due to start on Sunday, implemented in 3 phases. Phase 1 includes a 6-week ceasefire and an increase in the number of humanitarian aid trucks being allowed into Gaza. Israeli troops would withdraw from all of the territory's densely populated areas, and Hamas would release 33 hostages, while Israel would free hundreds of Palestinian prisoners. Negotiations over Phase 2 would begin by day 16. If agreement is reached, Phase 2 would see Hamas free more hostages and a full Israeli withdrawal from all of Gaza. There'll also be negotiations over a permanent end to the war. The final phase is expected to include the beginning of Gaza's reconstruction. Displaced Palestinians would be allowed to return to their homes anywhere in the territory, and Hamas would return any further remains of dead hostages. Well, the International Rescue Committee helps people affected by humanitarian crises to survive, recover and rebuild their lives. They're on the ground in Gaza, and Ciaran Donnelly is their Senior Vice President for Crisis Response, Recovery and Development. He joins us from New York. Welcome to DW. How are you gearing up for Sunday if this ceasefire deal is ratified?
Well, first, it's important to say this is a moment of real hope for Palestinians in Gaza. After 15 months of conflict, the potential, the possibility for cessation of violence and for humanitarian agencies like ours to be able to scale up humanitarian assistance is something that we're incredibly hopeful to be able to see. We are preparing to scale up our efforts. We are providing medical assistance, water supplies, nutrition supplies, specialized services for women and children inside Gaza, and have been for over a year now. We are getting the supply chains ready. We're getting staff ready alongside our fellow agencies in the humanitarian effort. But it's important to be clear that a cessation of violence is only the first step in being able to scale up aid. Over the last 15 months, humanitarian organizations have faced real safety and security challenges and logistical challenges because of bombing and ongoing hostilities, but also because of bureaucratic and administrative barriers. And so what we also need to see is a loosening, a lifting of the restrictions on getting people and supplies into Gaza, on being able to move around. We need loosening of restrictions on so-called dual-use items. We need to be able to get the supplies in and be able to reach people who need them in order to be able to scale up at the speed and at the volume that's needed, given the dire situation on the ground.
I wanted to ask about the safety of aid workers themselves. This conflict has seen a number killed. How long do you wait to see that the shooting has actually stopped before you send people in?
Well, we and other agencies have been delivering assistance throughout this war, as we do in many countries around the world. And so we are never in a position of waiting for fighting to stop before trying to reach people affected. So that's an ongoing process. But obviously, in the midst of bombing, and particularly with the intensity that we've seen across Gaza, and with bombing being carried out even in so-called humanitarian zones, it's been very difficult for us. The security of our staff is a primary priority. So it's been very difficult for us to reach those people most in need. So we are, not in a sense, not waiting for the bombs to stop falling before getting ready to move. But I do want to emphasize what I said a minute ago. Some of the biggest constraints on our teams and other humanitarian agencies getting to the people who most need it have not been directly as a result of bombing and fighting, but have been because of blockages and refusal of permission for humanitarian convoys. And without that, we won't be able to take advantage of the opportunity that the ceasefire holds to be able to support people who desperately need help.
So do you expect that to be covered by this deal, or is this a case of just having to wait and see what the reality on the ground is?
I haven't seen the full details of the deal. I would very much hope and encourage those with influence to ensure that it is covered. I've heard reports that the deal will allow for up to 600 trucks a day to cross into Gaza. I'd remind viewers that 500 trucks a day was the pre-war level needed to sustain life. Given the destruction and the needs on the ground, we need many more trucks than that to be able to get in. But counting trucks itself isn't just the point. We need to make sure those trucks have the right types of food and fuel, clothes for the winter conditions, medical supplies, and that once they cross into Gaza, that they're able to move around, that they're able to get to logistics hubs, that people are able to access services and so on.
If all goes well, how long before, I was going to say life gets back to normal, but that's we're talking about years. How long before this stops being a catastrophe?
If all goes well is a big if, isn't it? Given the situation on the ground, what we really hope to see is that we progress through the phases envisaged by the ceasefire agreement that you described a moment ago. That we go from phase 1 into phases 2 and 3 without a return to conflict. That's the first thing that's needed. We need to move from a life-saving, life-sustaining posture in Gaza into a reconstruction effort. But in reality, given the destruction of the health system, given the destruction of the water system, given the levels of displacement, the prevalence of unexploded ordnance, we're talking many months before we're able to talk about a serious reconstruction effort. And that is dependent on the right security and political conditions being in place as well.
OK, we wish you well. Good talking to you. Thanks for joining us. Ciaran Donnelly from the International Rescue Committee. Thank you so much.